Only the dead have seen the end of war. Plato. In the early days of October 2023, a sudden eruption of conflict unfolded, shaking the already tumultuous landscape of the Israeli-Palestinian region. The adversaries at the heart of this upheaval were Israel and Hamas, the militant Islamic organization that had held dominion over the Gaza Strip since 2006. The initial volley in this renewed bout of hostilities came from Hamas fighters who launched a barrage of rockets into Israeli territory. Simultaneously, they executed a daring incursion into southern Israeli cities and towns located perilously close to the Gaza Strip's border. This audacious assault resulted in the loss of life and limb, affecting not just hundreds of soldiers, but also a significant number of innocent civilians. Additionally, dozens were taken hostage by the marauding militants. The attack took Israel by complete surprise, leaving its populace and leadership grappling with the sudden escalation of violence. In swift response to the threat, Israel mounted a counter-offensive marked by deadly precision. On the very next day after the October 7th attack, Israel's cabinet made a formal declaration of war against Hamas. This declaration was swiftly followed by a directive from the defense minister to the Israeli Defense Force, ordering a complete siege of the Gaza Strip. The roots of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict run deep, extending to the end of the 19th century. The year 1947 witnessed the adoption of United Nations Resolution 181, commonly known as the Partition Plan. This ambitious proposal aimed to partition the British Mandate of Palestine into distinct Arab and Jewish states. The formal establishment of the State of Israel on May 14, 1948, marked the trigger for the First Arab-Israeli War. This conflict culminated in Israel's victory, but it also led to the displacement of an estimated 750,000 Palestinians. The fallout left the territory divided into three components: the State of Israel, the West Bank along the Jordan River, and the Gaza Strip. Subsequent years witnessed escalating tensions, especially between Israel and its neighbouring nations of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, following the 1956 Suez Crisis and Israel's incursion into the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt, Jordan, and Syria solidified mutual defence pacts in anticipation of potential Israeli aggression. In June 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egyptian and Syrian air forces, igniting the Six-Day War. The conflict concluded with Israel gaining control over significant territories, including the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. In a follow-up to this, the Yom Kippur War, also known as the October War, emerged in 1973 when Egypt and Syria jointly launched a surprise two-front assault on Israel. However, this conflict did not result in substantial territorial changes for the involved parties. Nevertheless, it did lead to negotiations over previously ceded territory, notably in the case of Egypt. Despite notable improvements in relations between Israel and some of its neighbours following the Camp David Accords of 1979, the critical issue of Palestinian self-determination and self-governance remained unresolved. In 1987, the First Intifada erupted as hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip rose against Israeli rule. In 1993, the Oslo I Accords facilitated a framework for Palestinian self-governance in these areas, establishing mutual recognition between the newly formed Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government. Furthermore, progress came with the Oslo II Accords in 1995, which mandated Israel's withdrawal from 6 cities and 450 towns in the West Bank. In 2000, a series of factors including Palestinian grievances over Israeli control of the West Bank, a faltering peace process, and Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's visit to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam, in September 2000, sparked a second Intifada, a period of sustained Palestinian unrest lasting until 2005. In response, the Israeli government initiated the construction of a barrier wall around the West Bank in 2002, despite international opposition, including legal challenges at the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. The power dynamics in the Palestinian territories underwent significant changes when Hamas emerged victorious in the Palestinian Authority's parliamentary elections in 2006, ousting the long-standing Fatah majority party. This victory handed Hamas, a political and militant entity influenced by the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood, control over the Gaza Strip. Gaza, a narrow strip of land along the Mediterranean Sea, bordered by Egypt to the south, had been under the semi-autonomous rule of the Palestinian Authority since 1993. However, this electoral victory was not recognized by the United States, the European Union, and other Western nations, as Hamas had been designated as a terrorist organization by Western governments since the late 1990s. Following Hamas's seizure of control, internal strife and violence flared between Hamas and Fatah, spanning the period from 2006 to 2011. A series of fruitless peace negotiations and deadly confrontations eventually gave way to a reconciliation agreement in 2014, with Fatah entering into a unity government with Hamas. In the summer of 2014, clashes in the Palestinian territories culminated in a full-scale military confrontation between the Israeli military and Hamas. During this conflict, Hamas fired nearly 3,000 rockets into Israeli territory, met with a significant Israeli offensive in Gaza. The skirmish finally concluded in late August 2014, through a ceasefire brokered by Egypt. However, it came at a significant human cost, with casualties on both sides. 73 Israelis and 2,251 Palestinians lost their lives. A resurgence of violence between Israelis and Palestinians occurred in 2015, during which Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of Fatah declared that Palestinians would no longer be bound by the territorial divisions created by the Oslo Accords. The tensions were further fueled by protests held in the Gaza Strip in March and May of 2018, near the border with Israel. The situation escalated with the final protest coinciding with the 70th anniversary of the Nakba, the Palestinian exodus that accompanied Israel's independence in 1948. Though most demonstrators maintained a peaceful stance, some breached the perimeter fence, hurling rocks and other objects. The United Nations reported that 183 protesters were killed, and more than 6,000 were wounded by live ammunition. This environment of tension exacerbated the division between Fatah and Hamas, with Fatah controlling the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank, and Hamas effectively ruling the Gaza Strip. This situation persisted through the late 2010s and into the early 2020s, despite efforts from Mahmoud Abbas to unify the Palestinian people under the banner of the Palestinian Authority. In May 2018, hostilities flared once more between Hamas and the IDF, in what was the most intense period of violence since 2014. Before a ceasefire was reached, militants in Gaza fired over 100 rockets into Israel, provoking a series of Israeli strikes against more than 50 targets in Gaza during a 24-hour flare-up. The Trump administration under President Donald J. Trump prioritized achieving an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal in its foreign policy. In 2018, the administration halted funding for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which provides aid to Palestinian refugees, and made the contentious move of relocating the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a departure from a long-standing US policy. The relocation was celebrated by the Israeli leadership, but fiercely criticized by Palestinian leaders and other Middle Eastern and European nations. While Israel regards a complete and united Jerusalem as its capital, Palestinians assert East Jerusalem as the capital of their future state. In January 2020, the Trump administration unveiled its long-anticipated Peace to Prosperity plan. Regrettably, this proposal was met with rejection by the Palestinians, primarily due to its support for future Israeli annexation of settlements in the West Bank and its insistence on an undivided Jerusalem under Israeli control. In August and September 2020, the United Arab Emirates (UAE) and Bahrain both decided to normalize relations with Israel, marking only the third and fourth instances of Arab nations doing so, preceded by Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. These historic agreements, known as the Abraham Accords, came after over 18 months of US-hosted ministerial talks in Warsaw, Poland, focused on the future of peace in the Middle East. However, Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas of Fatah rejected the accords, a stance that Hamas also adopted. In October 2020, an Israeli court ruled that several Palestinian families residing in Sheikh Jarrah, a neighborhood located in East Jerusalem, were to be evicted by May 2021. Their land was slated to be transferred to Jewish families. In February 2021, a group of these Palestinian families filed an appeal to the court's ruling, leading to protests around the appeal hearings and the ongoing legal dispute concerning property ownership, as well as the forceful displacement of Palestinians from their homes in Jerusalem. In late April 2021, Palestinians initiated street protests in Jerusalem to express their vehement objection to the impending evictions. This wave of demonstrations, sparked by the inhabitants of Sheikh Jarrah and bolstered by other activists, led to nightly sit-ins. As the legal battles persisted and the court ruled in favour of the evictions in early May, the protests swelled in size and intensity. Israeli police used force against the demonstrators, culminating in a violent encounter at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem on May 7th. This clash saw Israeli police deploying stun grenades, rubber bullets, and water cannons against the protesters, resulting in hundreds of Palestinians sustaining injuries. These clashes within Jerusalem's Old City exacerbated the already heightened tensions across East Jerusalem, particularly with the arrival of Jerusalem Day. Following several days of escalating violence in Jerusalem, marked by the use of lethal and non-lethal force by Israeli police, Hamas, the militant organisation governing Gaza, and other Palestinian militant groups, launched hundreds of rockets into Israeli territory on May 10th. In response, Israel conducted artillery bombardments and airstrikes, with some resulting in casualties on the Palestinian side. Though Israel claimed to target Hamas and other militants, and their associated infrastructure such as tunnels and rocket launchers, it expanded its aerial campaign to include non-military facilities. This included residential buildings, media headquarters, and refugee and healthcare facilities. After 11 days of intense fighting, a ceasefire was brokered by Egypt on May 21, 2021, between Israel and Hamas. Both sides declared a form of victory. Regrettably, more than 250 Palestinians lost their lives, nearly 2,000 others were wounded, and at least 13 Israelis perished during this violent chapter. In Gaza, the authorities estimated tens of millions of dollars in damage, and the United Nations reported that more than 72,000 Palestinians were displaced due to the fighting. With the resurgence of hostilities on October 7, 2023, between Israel and Hamas, President Joe Biden issued a robust statement of support for Israel. On the same day that Israel declared war on the terrorist group, the United States announced a renewal of arms shipments and the repositioning of its warships in the Mediterranean Sea, closer to Israel. This move reflected a resolute commitment to bolstering Israel's defense in the face of escalating hostilities. However, while the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency meeting to discuss the renewed violence, the members failed to reach a consensus statement. The conflict's history of brutality prompted immediate concerns for the safety of civilians in Israel and the Palestinian territories, as well as the fate of hostages held by militants in Gaza. In just the first 2 days of fighting, the toll was staggering, with an estimated 800 Israelis and 500 Palestinians losing their lives. The rising death toll remained a paramount concern in the ongoing conflict. While the United States refrained from immediately confirming reports of direct Iranian intelligence and security forces' involvement in planning the October 7th attack by Hamas, Iran's established patronage relationship with Hamas and other extremist groups in the Middle East cast a shadow of concern. Beyond viewing the attacks as a possible signal of Iran's readiness to escalate its influence in various Middle Eastern conflicts, experts also feared the potential involvement of another extremist group, Hezbollah, which enjoys Iranian backing. The prospect of Hezbollah's entry into the war threatened to expand the conflict between Israel and Palestinian borders. Reports on October 9th indicated that the IDF had fired at targets within Lebanon, where Hezbollah maintains a strong presence. However, Israel's statement on the operation did not offer explicit clarity on its objectives. In 2023, the United States had actively pursued an effort to broker a normalization accord between Israel and Saudi Arabia. However, the October conflict disrupted the progress made by the Israelis and Saudis towards finding common ground. Saudi Arabia has historically advocated for the rights and safety of Palestinian Arab populations in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. In particular, Gaza's residents now find themselves in the line of fire due to the IDF's operations, endangering the diplomatic strides made by Israel and Saudi Arabia. The October 2023 conflict between Israel and Hamas represents the most significant escalation in the long-standing Israeli-Palestinian conflict in several decades, casting a shadow of uncertainty over the future of the entire region.